I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. Welcome to this early Sunday release. I've got a returning guest. It's time for an update. This guest spent years going in and out of Washington, D.C., helping administration, starting with the Reagan administration with healthcare issues. He's not here to talk about healthcare issues. His background is a orthopedic surgeon. He's retired now. He has a very popular radio show called Operation Freedom on DaveJanda.com. Spoiler alert, it's Dave Janda. But Dave, you spent years going in and out of Washington, D.C. You built up all kinds of great contacts politically with law enforcement and intelligence contacts. That's how you're able to do this, your new career with OperationFreedom.com. And you've been straight on, right on. And one of the things that came out, I wanted to bring out, well, first of all, thanks for being on the show.
I thank you, Greg. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be with you. And I always appreciate the times you're able to come on our platform and educate all of our listeners and viewers of what's really happening behind the curtain, information they'll never get from the fake media.
The fake media, the propaganda media.
It's never been so fake as this week. I mean, it just gets worse and worse.
Bob Woodward, give back your Pulitzer. Come on. Yeah, three of your big sources. I didn't say that. Anyway.
Go ahead.
Woodward
is held up by the lamestream fake media as one of the icons in the industry, and I see why they do that. I mean, they put Richard Nixon's scalp partly on his belt and partly on Bernstein's belt. But if you look at his book, his two, as you mentioned, major sources that were bombshell interviews, bombshell information, General Mattis and General Kelly, have both come out and said, hey, we never said this stuff. And a person who has been on your show, has been on my show, Kevin Shipp. Kevin Shipp is one of the whistleblowers. I put him in the category of Bill Binney with the NSA as a whistleblower.
Yeah, former CIA.
Kevin Shipp, former CIA, and as you have mentioned, one of his positions was to protect the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, which at the time was Bill Casey. And Bob Woodward, in one of his other books, mentioned that he spent Bill Casey's last hours with him. Bill Casey gave him deathbed confessions. Kevin Shipp has come out and been very straightforward, as Kevin always is, and said, because if he doesn't know something, he says, I don't know. But if he knows something, he'll tell you. And Kevin came out and said, listen, I was in charge of security and protection for Bill Casey. And he goes, and I can tell you, Bob Woodward did not spend any time with Bill Casey on his deathbed. In fact, we prevented him from seeing Bill Casey in his final days and hours and the like. So Woodward feeds off of this reputation that he had with Watergate. And remember,
yeah, he's gone to lunch a lot on that one.
And Woodward's background is he has an intelligence agency background. He was not just some journalist that broke a huge story. He had huge not only intelligence contacts, but he, in fact, it's my understanding, was directly tied to the intelligence agencies, which is not surprising, is what we know about Project Operation Mockingbird, where the CIA essentially infiltrated all the TV, radio, print media delivery methods to every American.
This what's going on? I thought it looked like. I just stepped back and tried to take a 40,000-foot view of it, and it just looks like they're recycling this 25th Amendment thing, like they're panicked, completely and totally panicked. Is that the read you get from it? What's your read?
I believe this is not coming from a position of strength on behalf of the fake media, which is a tentacle of the globalist syndicate, a syndicate that has been responsible for multiple wars, for the financial chaos that has occurred across the world. This is not from a position of strength that they're doing this. This is from a position of weakness and desperation. Greg, there was a 1-2 punch this week. The Woodward book came out. And then where they were talking about chaos within the White House and essentially Donald Trump being unstable. And then the second hit came with this New York Times op-ed piece from an anonymous, quote, senior level official, end quote. Now, Greg, as you mentioned, I first went to Washington in 1988 when I gave some input at the behest of President Reagan to the President Reagan, in conjunction with then Surgeon General C. Everett Koop, on making the healthcare system more available, more affordable, and more quality oriented. And I also spent time in Washington under Bush 1, a bit under Bush 2, a bit under Clinton, again, as a consultant coming in and out. Not that they listened, not that they acted upon things. Reagan did, but the others, no. And we've outlined that before in previous interviews. But when they speak about the New York Times of a, quote, senior level official, end quote. Now, many people that haven't had experience in Washington say, oh, well, that must be the vice president. That must be a cabinet member. Greg, there are thousands, not dozens, thousands of people that can be considered senior level officials. Now, in particular, there has been a rumor out there that this senior level official was Pence, the vice president. Now,
no way.
Well, I agree with you, and I agree with you for several reasons on that. Number one, I am not a fan of Pence. A lot of people have gotten down on me because, frankly, there's something about the guy I just don't trust. And there's a presentation style that he has that I associated with some other folks that I dealt with in Washington, and they were not good actors. So I am not biased in favor of Pence. In fact, I have gotten hammered by many people for not being supportive of Pence. Now, that being said, I spoke to some people who I have known for many years in Washington about this New York Times anonymous senior level official. And I brought the fact to say, well, there's this rumor out there that it's Pence, and they're calling this, rather than deep throat, going back to Woodward, but Veep throat, right? I said, there's something about this letter that just doesn't ring solid to me when it comes to this being Pence. And they said, it's not Pence, period. And this was from multiple people. It's not Pence. And understand something. I am not a Pence fan. I am not someone who has been a cheerleader for Pence, ever. And will never be. But I also, it is utmost that we put facts on the table and the truth on the table. And the truth of the table on the table is that from everybody I speak to that I know and trust and have known them for decades, tell me this is not Pence. So then the question is, who was it? And so it's interesting. The New York Times is now changing their story. What they're now saying is that, well, this, quote, senior level official, remember, this could be thousands of people associated with the Trump administration, including Obama holdovers, right? So what the New York Times is now saying is, well, this senior level official didn't exactly come to us. The senior level official used an intermediary to come to us. Now, Greg,
come on. Now you have a source, anonymous source, outside of a source.
Right.
I heard it could be a student that wrote a paper. That's been floated around.
Well, there's also been floated around that this was completely the New York Times.
This is not journalism.
Right? So I'll tell you what my take is, and the take that the best I can get from all of the folks I know in D.C. with decades worth of experience, that this senior level official is probably not very senior. This is someone who is probably or undoubtedly an Obama holdover. The letter smells of someone of a, if you will, a psyops operation that emanates from an intelligence agency. Now, Trump has been going after the infrastructure of the Central Intelligence Agency. He's made no bones about that. He's been very upfront about that. There are a tremendous number of people that are very disgruntled. They're very upset that he's gone after Brennan, rightfully so, in my opinion. But there are many loyalists to Brennan still in the Central Intelligence Agency. And my contacts tell me they believe that this anonymous letter came from a disgruntled Obama holdover that's very loyal to Brennan within the CIA, and they got this to the New York Times through an intermediary, and then what happened?
Well, this is propaganda.
Right, exactly. Well, and we could actually label it even more than propaganda.
Go ahead.
It's almost treasonous and seditious. The New York Times then took this information, and what I've been told is blew it up. In other words, really put some extra meat and bones behind it, hyperbole behind it. And so this they felt was a combination of a disgruntled Obama holdover associated with the intelligence agency, in particular the CIA, that got some information to the New York Times, then took it and blew it up. Now remember, they just added this new person to their editorial board. Sarah Zhang, I believe, is her name. And you and I...
The racist. I hate white people. Sarah, I hate white people.
No, yeah, but what she specifically said is, quote, Greg, she said, quote, I hate old white men. Yeah. Well, Trump obviously is older, and he's white, and he's a man. So does it surprise anybody that the New York Times, who they then defended this individual with her statements, would fabricate something and to go along with some of this skeleton information they got from this disgruntled Obama holdover? But see, Greg, this is backfiring, and it's backfiring for several reasons. Number one, first of all, it gives license to Trump to go in and clean house, because I believe their ultimate goal, this is why I believe it was a PSYOPs operation, their ultimate goal was to get Trump so wound up that willy-nilly he'd go in there and start firing people that were, circle the wagons and shoot inward, and essentially start firing people that were actually loyal to him. And I believe this was one of their goals, in addition to putting the 25th Amendment on the table again, as Woodward tried to do, saying the guy's unstable, and Elizabeth Warren jumped on. By the way, who is Elizabeth Warren to be talking about unstable mentation activities when she faked her own background in order to get into the Senate?
Well, and also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was the slush fund for the Democrats.
Right. So,
I mean, that's your idea of rebuilding America and rebuilding business?
Right. So we always have to consider these sources when they start going after people. We've talked about Woodward and the fact that essentially he has been shown that he is an operative of the deep state, that Woodward will fabricate information in order to advance the agenda of the deep state. The same is true as Elizabeth Warren. The same is true of the New York Times. The same is true of the CIA. One of the issues that they tried to pin on Trump, that he's unstable, is because Trump keeps talking about there's this deep state, and this deep state is trying to undermine him. Well, if you read this op-ed from this anonymous source, a senior level official in the Trump administration, what does it say? It says exactly what Trump has been saying, that there's a group of people within his administration that are trying to undermine him, that are trying to, if you will, destroy his agenda. And in particular, they point about, can you imagine Donald Trump? He is trying to establish détente with Russia. He is trying to establish détente with North Korea. Well, yeah, that might be treasonous when it comes to the deep state, because the deep state is all about mass murder. The deep state is all about war. The deep state is all about funneling huge amounts of money into the military-industrial complex of which they had their ties into. So, to the deep state, trying to negotiate and establish détente with Russia in North Korea, in their sick world, is treason. In our world, it means a world that is less prone to conflict. So what this letter does, it actually supports Donald Trump in a way where it says, look, what Trump has been saying, where the New York Times have been calling Trump full of crazy conspiracy theories and instability because he's talking about this deep state. He's talking about this undermining of his myth. This letter that they published states that. It proves Donald Trump's point. And number two, it also proves the point, as Trump has laid out, that the, quote, media is the enemy of the people and people of this country.
Amen to that, brother.
And that letter really, really makes Trump's case on both of those points. Plus, it gives him license now to go in and clean out these Obama holdovers.
Remember Jason Blair? Remember him? Worked for the New York Times. I stopped by the New York Times. He wrote a book called, I think, Burning Down My Master's House. The New York Times has become Jason Blair.
You know what? You're right.
They have. They fired him for that. He made stuff up. He admitted to it. He wrote a book about it. Well, but the New York Times is Jason Blair. I
actually think you're absolutely correct.
They're not news.
No.
You can't look at them and say, oh, that's how a journalist would. No. That's how Pravda would work.
Greg, when you were with CNN and ABC Network News, if you went to them and said, hey, look, this intermediary came to me and gave me some information from an anonymous source who I can't identify even to you, the editor. This anonymous source about they're involved in sabotage, sedition, and treason.
Let's just say it's at a car company. Let's not say it's at the White House.
Okay. Greg, would they allow you back in the day when you were? Greg, what would they have done to you?
I don't ever remember using I never did. Would never allow that. A single anonymous source. You can get a tip from an anonymous source, no problem, but you better run down at least 2 and sometimes 3 on record sources to back that up.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you hear this, well, we made an honest mistake. No. What you're doing, the way you're doing it is dishonest. And therefore you are creating dishonest mistakes. When I did it, we every interview was transcribed. The lawyers got every full transcription here. If we had a soundbite, they'd go through the transcription. Say, okay, all right, that's in context. I mean, that's how you not make a mistake. That's what you're trying to do. So if you make a mistake, it's an honest mistake. But this is fraud. This is fraud because they are holding themselves out as without fear or favor. We're journalists with a big J. We're super J. They're not.
No.
They're burning down their master's house.
They've been exposed. And I believe this op-ed, even to the most oblivious of sheeple out there, I would hope that they would at least start to question what they're seeing and reading in what's called still, and it galls me to say this, there are many people that still believe it's the mainstream media.
It's sad.
That you and I identify as the lamestream media or the fake media. And Greg, what was really odd also about that letter is we just went through this funeral thing with McCain. At the end of this letter, it not only praises McCain, but it lauds McCain, and it well, wait a minute. First of all, what was that doing in there?
I don't know what was McCain doing with him. What
was that doing in there? I mean, I don't want to.
What was McCain doing with pictures of him with Al Qaeda? I mean, ISIS.
Greg, there's a lot of things we can bring up about McCain, anyway. and right now, so here's the problem you have with this. If we bring up a bunch of stuff with McCain, whether it's how he was involved in the death of dozens of people on the Forrestal when he tried some hot dog move on the carrier deck that led to a missile being fired and a huge fire and dozens of people dying and dozens of people being injured, or whether we speak about how some of the captives at the Hanoi Hilton would refer to McCain in a not positive light.
I've heard him.
If we even go back, Greg, and look at his involvement in the savings and loan debacle with
an unindicted co-conspirator,
Heating 5 that led to I believe it was $160 billion hit to every taxpayer in our country, and he was a primetime player in that. If we go to the fact, I don't know if you've ever watched some of these, but one of the things that I was tipped onto many years ago is how he treated POW families at Senate hearings when they were asking for information about their loved ones who were still missing, and that there were reports that they might be actually still being held captive or had passed away long after John McCain came home. You want to see what the real John McCain is like or was like? Let me tell you something. It was despicable. It was how he treated, how he denigrated, how he yelled, how he demeaned these poor families in public was it's beyond stomach turning. It was beyond reprehensible. And so, you know, if you look at it, there was not a war that this guy did not support. And as you mentioned, he essentially was an ambassador with his pictures of with Al Qaeda members, him with ISIS members,
top guys,
him with Muslim Brotherhood members. I mean, this guy was an ambassador to the radical Islamists. And remember, he was the guy who voted to continue Obamacare.
Yeah.
Which I believe has harmed millions of Americans. He had an opportunity to put a tourniquet on a patient bleeding to death, the patient being our country and our healthcare delivery system. And what did he do? He waved his hand and he walked away from the patient.
My insurance went up to $2,900 a month. $2,900 a month.
Well, and you're not alone. Millions of Americans have paid a price. There was just an article in the Zero Hedge, and you know, this is what's so aggravating to me. In 2009, when I identified that half of Obamacare was hidden in the stimulus bill, and I identified that this issue was electronic medical records was going to destroy the doctor-patient relationship, that it was going to kill healthcare delivery in our country. That was 9 years ago. Now, I was greeted for my analysis with and you and I discussed this, an IRS harassment-based tax audit that went on for 9 months. And when our accountants were told, well, the reason why he's getting audited and his family's getting audited is because of his radio show and his opposition to Obamacare.
Heaven forbid.
And I was treated to dozens and dozens of threats by Obama zealots because of me pointing out the facts. And what I was saying in 2009, Zero Hedge just has an article on it about how doctors cannot work in the system anymore. They're burning out, and it's because they're having to spend more time on electronic medical records than they are taking care of patients. And it's destroying docs psychologically because they can't do what they're trained to do, is take care of people and take care of people effectively and correctly.
We talked about this. You think John Kyle, who's been appointed McCain's seat, he was former senator in Arizona, he'll be a senator again. You think he'll vote yes to stop Obamacare?
Yeah, yes, I believe he will.
Yeah, and you know, there's 25 seats. The Democrats are defending 25, and there's 2 independents, but they're just all Democrats. They're not going to hold all 25 seats. There's no.
So this is why McCain. We've kind of laid out. Wait a minute. This is what this guy's all about. Yet in this letter, this senior level official in the White House is lauding John McCain, how great he was and how praiseworthy. And really, why would you even put that in the letter? And it goes along with this trying to, if you will, well, you know, he just went through this big funeral issue and the like, which brings me to another issue, Greg. There have been issues about John McCain and his death, or frankly, his non-death.
You're going to break up the John Kasich thing.
There were rumors out there that McCain actually didn't die, that he was sent to Gitmo. Now, I can tell you, I've run this by my sources, and all my sources say, no, that's not true. Man's dead. But then, and I sent you a clip the other day.
Yeah.
Of John Kasich was on CNN.
Former governor of Ohio.
right? Former or the current governor of Ohio,
current
now
governor.
with, he was with Cuomo. And they get on this, they all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Kasich brings up McCain. Now, one of the other issues was, so McCain died of brain cancer. Okay. And family pulled the plug, or not pulled the plug. They said, well, he's not going to have treatment anymore. And then within 24 hours, he's dead. I can tell you as a physician, that's rare. That you withhold medical treatment and within a day somebody dies. Okay, it can happen, but it's not common. But then there was this rumor that, well, maybe he really didn't die and no, that's false. But then there's this other rumor that McCain was prosecuted by a tribunal and found guilty and of treason. Yeah. And had a hand potentially, since he was already dying from the brain cancer, he had a hand in his own death. Now that was another rumor out there. And then all of a sudden, Kasich opens his mouth. And I don't know if you can put it on CNN. Now, this statement was never retracted by Kasich, never retracted by Cuomo, never retracted by CNN. Cuomo never followed up. But it wasn't just a little slip of the tongue. It was in a sense that it wasn't like he changed one word in his statement. It was almost like a bit of a Freudian slip. And what he said was, quote, "It's been 24 hours since John McCain has been put to death," end quote. Now, as you have mentioned, some people are saying, well, he really meant laid to rest.
That's right. Yes, some people are saying that.
Well, that's far different.
That's way off.
Put to death.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, John McCain's dead, and now we got an op-ed of an anonymous senior level who, in addition to this whole PSYOPs operation, is throwing John McCain in there.
Well,
and it was just extremely odd. And as I mentioned, if you look at, and not to speak ill of the dead, but we have to speak factually of people alive and dead. And I'll tell you, if I was trying to make a case for someone, as they were trying to make in this letter about Trump being off his game, one of the last people in my mind I would bring up would be John McCain, who in public, needless to say, had more than a fiery temper.
Let's move on to military tribunals, and it's something that I've seen on the internet, and it's something you brought up, and you sent me some tape on it. Something that other people, when you sent it to me, I thought, oh my gosh, other people have seen the same thing, but you were the first to point it out to me, and you did some research, and I just off the top of my head have been in the news business since the 70s. I've never ever heard somebody who is being going through the process to be confirmed as a justice to the Supreme Court been asked about military tribunals. Never. And yet, Lindsey Graham brought this all up with Kavanaugh in his. What do you make of this dissertation? It went on for, I don't know, 4 minutes or so.
Yeah,
explaining how we can have military tribunals. What do you make of this?
Well, so now we have cases talking about McCain being put to death, and I don't know if he was or not. But I'm not bringing it. Kasich brings this up, and essentially gives fuel to this rumor about there being a military tribunal that McCain was brought in front of and found guilty of, and, well, this was the end result. Now, I don't have evidence that that's the case, other than I got Kasich now saying, McCain was put to death. Well, then, out of the blue, and I sent you this clip, and I don't know if you can include this on the bottom part of this, Greg, but Lindsey Graham, good friend of John McCain's, was interviewing Brett Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court appointment process. And what was very interesting is, as this line of questioning goes on, and it went on between 4 and 5 minutes, not one individual interrupted Graham and saying, "What are you doing talking about military tribunals?
No,
What are you
not
doing?"
a word.
It was dead silence, right? Dead.
Laid out the case that we're at war since 2001, November 14th, and Kavanaugh knew about this.
Right. So Lindsey Graham looked straight at Kavanaugh, and as you have mentioned before, Lindsey Graham's doing the majority of the talking. Kavanaugh's just saying yes, yes,
that's
yes,
right.
yes. So he goes, "Did you know that the United States is now in a state of war, as authorized in September 14th, 2001, under the provision of the authorization for use of military force?" Kavanaugh, yeah, yes, I did. Did you know that aside from federal and national criminal laws, the United States now operates under the law of armed conflict, also known as the law of war? Military tribunals. His answer, yes, I did. Did you know the significance of the U.S. Supreme Court decision Johnson versus Eisentrager that states the U.S. Constitution does not confer a right of personal security or an immunity from military trial and punishment upon an alien enemy engaged in the hostile service of a government at war with the United States? Yes, I did. You know the significance of the U.S. Supreme Court decision of Hamdi, which recognized the power of the U.S. government to detain enemy combatants, including U.S. citizens? Everyone was, yeah. Did you know the significance of the U.S. Supreme Court decision ex parte Curran that allowed a U.S. military tribunal to try and execute Nazi German saboteurs captured and tried on American soil? His answer was yes. Now, I searched, and maybe somebody can find something different, but my search brings up nothing when it comes to during an appointment process, an appointment hearing of Supreme Court justice, that military tribunals and the fact that we're in this state of war and the fact that military tribunals can be in existence and that they can actually prosecute and lead to the execution of people. I've never seen that. I don't have evidence of that being brought up under any other appointment hearing.
You think we're getting ready for military tribunals?
Well, let's look.
Come on.
I think we're getting right. So I think we're getting ready for a financial reset, and I think we're getting ready for a rule of law reset. And you and I have discussed this before. And I say this for several reasons, Greg. Number one, back in December 21st of 2017, you and I have spoken about this. The bought-off lamestream fake media refuses to address it, and that's the executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. This is essentially restitution of the rule of law. And in this executive order dated December 21st, 2017, Donald Trump, and this is the last statement of the first paragraph or second paragraph, "I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat. I therefore determine that serious human rights abuse and corruption around the world constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States, and I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat." National emergency means that he can mobilize all law enforcement and military, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's on whitehouse.gov, so if anybody wants to look it up, you can look it up on whitehouse.gov. It's actually publicly posted. And
then on March 1st, 2018, he issues an executive order, amendments to the manual for court martials. An executive order and a 636-page annex issued on March 1st by U.S. President Donald Trump and the Department of Defense prepares the way for tribunals. The essence of these orders was that all U.S. civilians shall be subject to military justice and that the military will be able to hire non-military legal experts to help with the upcoming tribunals, according to Pentagon sources. Okay, So
it looks like we're getting ready for military tribunals, right?
Well, I think we are. Why would Lindsey Graham bring this up? Why would he bring this up at this time? And on top of that, we know that there are reportedly 40,000, 50,000, 51,000, whatever number you want to say, sealed indictments. We have actually seen some unsealing of these indictments of late, whether it's the Congressman Duncan, Hunter from California, or this Chris Collins from New York. Yes, they were Republicans, but they're unsealed. Whether you look at the 100 priests whose indictments were unsealed. So if you look at the number of human traffickers and pedophiles brought down, the largest in our country's history. As we've outlined before, Greg, in our interviews and on your show and on my show, the globalists, the syndicate, they utilize pedophile and human trafficking networks as a means of financial gain, but also as a means for bribery and blackmail. By taking down the pedophile human trafficking networks, you are going into the heart of the evil syndicate. You are taking out their control mechanism. That's the key to defeating an enemy, taking out their command and control center. The human trafficking, pedophile networks are their command and control center. So do I think we are on the verge, we are in the process of a rule of law reset? Yeah, whether it's the sealed indictments and some of them being unearthed, and as I've mentioned, they're not all going to be unsealed at once. Some of them might never be unsealed. But some of the ones that are unsealed, I believe we're seeing the ramifications of that when we see a huge number of folks within Congress, within Wall Street, within Hollywood, just walking away from their jobs. When you look at the number of firings in the Department of Justice and in the FBI, it's unheard of. This is all part of the reset. And there are people that will say, I don't see any evidence of the reset. Really? Yeah. Really? You don't see all these resignations, all these firings, all these demotions within the FBI, Department of Justice, all these congressmen and senators just picking up their sticks and going home and saying, I believe these are people that might not be involved that aren't involved in the pedophile human trafficking networks, but they might have some financial misdealings. And they're given a pass. They said, all right, we're going to let this go, but you're going to get the heck out of Dodge. You're gone. And so we have all these huge number. We have these CEOs leaving in mass. We have these Hollywood types leaving their jobs. We got these indictments. We have this issue of tribunals being brought up at a Supreme Court justice's nomination. We have this executive order about tribunals from March 2018. And then, and from a financial reset, all you have to do is look around the world. You know, the people that right now are saying, well, my 401k is doing fine and Facebook is hitting new highs every day. Get your head out of the sand. I mean, the world financially is imploding. Well, look at Argentina, look at Venezuela, look at Turkey, look at Iran, look at Europe.
Iran is imploding. They need a war.
Look at Brazil. Look at all these. Look, it's all falling apart. Look, they just came out with economic numbers, right? And if you watch Maria Bartiromo, well, it was projected between about 198,000 new jobs were going to be created. And wow, look at this. 201,000 jobs were created. This is fantastic. Okay, Maria, what about the fact that they added 104,000 jobs to the number? It was a bogey number called the birth-death model to get to that 201,000. What about the fact that 2 million more people left the workforce this month? What about that, Maria? If everything's so fine. Folks, things are not fine, and I believe we are on the verge of a financial reset. Donald Trump has even said this, that there are going to be some tough times ahead.
Well, didn't he come out with this month is the National Preparedness Month?
Okay, well, let's talk about this because I put out a YouTube earlier this week, okay? And it was about the presidential proclamation on National Preparedness Month being September 2018. And here's what he said. National Preparedness Month is a time to focus our attention on the importance of preparing our families, homes, businesses, and communities for disasters that threaten our lives, property, and homeland. Goes on. Tragedies are somber reminders that preparedness is a shared responsibility and that it is critical to maintain readiness. All Americans prepare for potential disasters by practicing a family emergency response plan, assembling a disaster supply kit, signing up for alerts on mobile devices, setting aside emergency savings, and maintaining adequate insurance policies for their homes and businesses. This month, I encourage all Americans to take the opportunity to ensure they have an emergency response plan in place and ready to be properly executed. Emergencies and disasters test the resilience and strength of families, communities, and our nation. It is impossible to avoid every challenge and threat, but we can and must prepare for them. By doing so, we can help protect our communities and save lives. I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim September 2018 as National Preparedness Month. I encourage all Americans, including federal, state, and local officials, to take actions to be prepared for disaster or emergency by making and practicing their emergency response plan. Each step we take to become better prepared makes a real difference in how our families, communities will respond and persevere when faced with the unexpected. Now, look, Greg, I put that out, and look, is this the first time a presidential proclamation was issued in September? Absolutely not. Since 2004, it's happened. But what I believe gives added significance to this September's is the fact that we, in December of 2017, this is the first September that when they issue this, we've had in place a national emergency as determined by that executive order from December 21st, 2017. We've had these military tribunal changes occur as of the executive order from March 1st, 2018. We have a financial system that's imploding internationally that will ultimately affect us here in the United States, like it or not. And we have a rule of law reset occurring where we have these thousands of indictments, where we have a Supreme Court nominee being asked about military tribunals, where we have a current governor of the state of Ohio stating that McCain was, quote, his words, not mine, put to death, end quote, where we have dozens of FBI and Department of Justice officials resigning, fired, demoted, where we have dozens of congressmen and senators leaving their offices forever, gone, where we have dozens of CEOs of businesses and of folks in Wall Street and in Hollywood going away. Look, I think that this month's proclamation by Trump has added significance. Many people have said to me, Dave, September is hurricane season. Yeah, well, so is July, so is August, so is September, October, and November. Okay? And by the way, is he really going to put out a national proclamation for preparedness, a national proclamation for preparedness just about hurricanes? When's the last hurricane that hit Kansas or Nebraska?
Now, your sources are thinking that this is all going to come to one giant crescendo. The indictments, you've been saying for a long time that after the primaries, which is going to be, I think, next week. I think Tuesday, if not the following Tuesday, is the last primary. You're thinking after the primaries that we could have indictments and a financial crash all in one. Is that what you're saying? Is that what your sources are saying?
They're saying that it's a distinct possibility. And here's what
wait. Stop. I want to back up now. Hold on. Let me get in with you. So you're saying that your sources, and I know you have very high sources, and I won't say who they are. I'm not going to out them. But I know they're very high. And you're saying your sources are braced for impact. It's going to get real. The fantasy world's going to go away.
Here's something, Greg, that you and I have not discussed before. And I spoke to this particular source who is, for the decades I've had access to his information, has been spot on. Here is what they are really worried about and why I believe this proclamation has added significance and why there are so many people concerned about what's going on. My source told me that they're very concerned that for a EMP event in the near future, and that would lead to problems when it related to the rule of law in this country and to financial markets.
Are you talking about, are they thinking that this is going to be a Hail Mary pass from the deep state? That the deep state and the Democrats that are up, and even the Rhino Republicans, I mean, there are so many people that have basically sold out the country. Are you talking that we could have a attack from the deep state to try to turn the table over?
They're concerned about attack from the deep state as an act of not power, but an act of desperation.
Woo.
And in fact, Greg, Let's go back to 2013, because this was pointed out to me by the source. In 2013, there was a seismic event off the coast of South Carolina.
That's right. Lindsey Graham's territory.
And Lindsey Graham, remember, was actually, I believe, having a press conference right while this was all going on. And he was kind of hysterical at this press conference. And in fact, this seismic event was actually not only was documented by actually Vladimir Putin. And after that seismic event occurred, Putin said, it appears that there was a seismic event off the coast of the United States, southeast coast of the United States, and appeared to be, its footprint appeared to mimic a nuclear event. And at the time, the concern is that there were 3 tactical nukes, this was during the Obama administration, that had gone missing. And my sources at the time said that there were 2 generals and 1 admiral who averted a potential EMP event, because what they did is they got their hands on one of those devices, and when they got their hands on that device, they were able to get it out into the ocean, as opposed to having it explode over the mid part of the country.
Wow.
That's what I was told at the time. That was 5 years ago. We discussed this actually on my show Operation Freedom at the time.
And you think that your sources are saying that and let me just kind of tie this all together. With all the press attacks and all this crazy, we're going to do journalism with anonymous single sources, which is stupid. It's not journalism. You couldn't defend that in any kind of journalism forum. And with all these crazy attacks and all this, this hyperventilating at the McCain funeral, at Aretha Franklin's funeral, all these elevated attacks, just off the rail stuff. You're saying that this is just the tremors of the deep state completely and totally wetting themselves, panicked, scared. They're going down.
Yes, and this is why we see the hysterics against Trump as well. This is why we see the whole Russian collusion narrative. This is why we see the attacks on Trump, trying to get him out of office. Because, look, as we've outlined before, Greg, does Trump have ties to the globalist syndicate? I believe he does, but not to the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis of globalists. I believe that if he does have ties, the ties are more to the silo of globalists that are more focused on peace and prosperity around the world, rather than the silo of globalists that have run the show for so many decades, and that being the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis. They're all about death, destruction, war, and enriching themselves.
They're going to go after them, and is it the Pacer family? They're even above them. You've talked about it on your show. So we all talk about the Rothschild-Rockefeller axis. There are a number of families in this globalist syndicate, but what I've been told is that the family that's actually at the head of it, that controls about 80 to 85% of the corporations that are listed on Wall Street, is a family by the name of Payseur, Payseur. They're going to go after them too?
I think that if let me put this in medical terms. If there's a cancer, and I believe the globalist syndicate is a cancer, I believe if you're going to adequately attempt to eradicate the cancer, I speak of this as a surgeon, you don't just remove half the tumor or 3/4 of the tumor. You have to remove the entire malignancy if you expect the patient being our world, the freedom of our world, to come back to life, to survive.
And you think this is And I know I'm sorry, I'm kind of going over, but you think that the have you been told that the arrests are going to be after they get Kavanaugh set in the Supreme Court? Because some of these people are going to go right to the Supreme Court. I mean, evidently Obama is up to his neck in all this. I mean, James Clapper said it was basically his fault that he tasked the agencies, even the Mueller investigation. I mean, this is going to go at least all the way to Obama, correct?
I believe it is. When you and I were last on together, we spoke about Clapper coming out saying, hey, Obama, he's the guy who's behind all this, right? Then after you and I spoke, and when you and I spoke last, I spoke about, I believe, that one of the high-profile arrests that's going to occur is with Brennan.
Yeah.
And right after we had that interview, he started going off the rails even more hysterical and more desperate. And has he been arrested yet? He has not. Do I believe he will be arrested? Yes, I believe he will. I believe that and now we hear through the grapevine that the grand jury has been convened for an extended period of time, and that McCabe is on the hook.
Yeah.
So yeah. I believe that the Brennans and the McCabes, the Comeys are all the Clintons and Obama are all in the crosshairs on this restitution of the rule of law. And let's face it, if they're not, then we're really not resetting the rule of law. It's just a shell game. It's smoke and mirrors. And that just doesn't mean Dems. It's ours too. It's anyone who has subverted the Constitution is on the hook. And anyone that is left off the hook, then this rule of law restitution is a sham. And what I was told is after the primaries, and now I don't know if there are any primaries left. I know there were some in September. I'm not sure if there are any left this month, but we're at a point where it's put up or shut up. Now we did see 100 priests indicted. We did see this congressman from California, Duncan Hunter, indicted. We did see Chris Collins indicted. Okay, we now hear that McCabe is in front of a grand jury. So there is some movement in that regard, but there has to be a lot greater movement sooner rather than later at this point, and it has to occur before the November elections of 2018.
So no doubt that they're gonna pull the trigger on this before the elections. Boy, talk about destabilizing! Holy cow!
Well, then the question is, so you have a patient who's sick, Greg, in critical condition.
Yeah.
And it's a patient that has a really bad problem, but if you can surgically excise the issue, that person has the best chance of surviving. But they're very, very sick now. So you have an option. You can either wait and hopefully have this patient get a little bit better before you resect that tumor, that cancer, or you make the decision, look, if we keep waiting, the person might get a little better, but the odds are they're going to get a lot worse to the point where they won't survive the operation. And I think that's where we are right now. And I think if we don't take that patient to the operating room, the patient being the rule of law of this country, if we don't take that patient to the operating room right now and resect that tumor, in other words, resuscitate the rule of law in this country, start in a significant way unsealing these indictments and bringing people to justice, then I think the patient dies. And one thing that nobody's talking about is, as the days go on, more and more judges are getting approved from the Senate. What was it the other day they approved? 54 judges?
Yeah.
In order to resurrect the rule of law in this country, you have to have judges present to oversee that, in addition to this other potential option, the tribunals. So what I've been told is, look, we got to get more judges that are going to adhere to the rule of law in the system before we can start opening stuff up. Well, we just had 54 more approved. That's a great step. I'm not sure how many more we need to take that next step, but the next step has to happen, because if it doesn't happen, I understand everyone's frustrations, because you're frustrated with it, I'm frustrated with it. I mean, let's face it, Greg, every day that goes by, you and I, because of what we do and what we say and the information we pass along, are vulnerable to the deep state.
Yeah.
So if there are two guys that want the restitution of the rule of law sooner rather than later and a neutering of the deep state, it's the two guys you're looking at right here, folks. So it can't happen soon enough, as far as our viewers are concerned and as far as you and I are concerned.
Your sources, what's the one thing that they've told you that's your biggest worry? What's your biggest worry? What's the thing that your sources tell you that it's your biggest worry?
That the deep state will be successful in implementing an EMP event.
That's an evil there. They'd stop the EMP event would stop electromagnetic pulse, right? That's what it is. It would stop all electronic commerce, at least for a while. Is that correct?
It will paralyze our country.
And they would try to do this over the middle of the country.
And I believe if adequately implemented, and I use adequately in a very sick way, but in these guys' terms, but if implemented the way they'd like, I believe millions of people would either perish or would have a life very different from what they have right now. And that's what I think. This is what we're up against. You have to know your enemy. And one of the big problems is that many people are willing to look the other way when it comes to our enemy. Our enemy is ruthless. Our enemy is determined. They have held power for many decades. They, under no circumstances, want to relinquish that power. They will do anything and everything to hold that power, that control, because that's what they're all about. The good news is there are several thousand of them, and there are millions of us. And I believe ultimately we will win this war. But we have to make sure we win this war with as many Americans whole as we can. And that's why what you do and what I try to do, and I believe what Trump is trying to do, and the people around Trump are trying to do, is so important. And this is why they are so hysterical in trying to get rid of him. This is why this op-ed piece. This is why Elizabeth Warren's talking about the 25th Amendment. This is why the fake Russian dossier. And let's face it, you've outlined this on your show. I've touched on it on mine. That fake Russian dossier was probably written by Bruce Orr, a member of Obama's Department of Justice, and edited by Steele, paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC, of which they colluded with Russians, whether it's this Deripaska or whatever his name is that Bruce Orr was meeting with, or that Mueller used to have an affiliation with back in 2009. Same guy. You want to talk about Russian collusion? The bottom line is this is why they're so desperate to get rid of Trump, because Trump is the embodiment of them losing control and power. And they will stop at nothing. Nothing.
Dave Jander, we're going to stop right there, my friend. Thanks for coming on and revealing what your sources are telling you and putting your brain on parade. A lot of people just needed to hear this. Oh, Q's real, right? Just quick. Q is real. They try to debunk it, but it's real, right?
So when it comes to Q, I believe there was this report out this week.
Right.
That Q is this troll by the name of Microchip. Now there are folks. So when that happens, you have to say, well, wait a minute. Is there something going on here? Because the word I've always heard is that a significant part of the information that Q has provided has actually been accurate.
Yes.
Now, there has been, according to my sources, some misinformation in some of the things Q has put forward. But the majority has actually been on target. And in fact, has been ahead of the game. And sometimes you can be so far ahead of the game, you look wrong when in fact you're right. It just hasn't played all the way out yet. That being said, there was this report that this microchip person was a troll, that he's the guy who did this. There was a very interesting report. There's a site, Neon Report. And some friends of mine that are very clued in on tech said, hey, take a look at this dissection that they did on this Neon Report of this microchip person that supposedly is saying that he is Q and this is all a fake. They said, this takedown on this Neon Report of this microchip character is actually very good. And in fact, really blows apart this microchip as being the person who is Q. So the bottom line is there someone who's funneling out information? The answer to that is yes. My sources believe that's accurate. They believe that this person, or several people, are actually behind the curtain, are actually providing information, the vast majority of which has been accurate. And what they also say, my sources, is the vast majority of information that has been said to be wrong is actually going to be proven to be right. It just has to play out over time.
Q is real.
I believe there is a person or persons who is going by the moniker of Q. Yes. Do I believe that the information they have passed out has been accurate to date? In many respects, yes. In some respects, no. But my sources say the information that has been said to be wrong just hasn't played all the way out.
But your sources say Q is real.
They believe Q is real.
Yeah, poof, you get good sources. I know I can't blat out your sources because you've told me some of them, but you got some good ones. So that's good. That's refreshing. That's comforting for people to know Q is real. And
you know what? And this is very important because the New York Times and the deep state want to dispel this, and that is that there are many people behind the wall, if you will, in every agency that are freedom-loving, and they are doing everything in their power and putting their lives on the line in doing so to make sure that this rule of law reset and this financial reset occurs in a means that is not deleterious to the American public as we go through it, and to minimize its effect, and that when we do get to the other side of this tunnel, that our country and our world is much better off. And people need to realize that there are people that are patriots, that are behind the wall fighting. And the New York Times wants to call that conspiracy theory. The deep state wants you to believe that that's conspiracy theory. I believe, and I know people that are involved in that fight on a daily basis. And they have been involved in that fight for an extended period of time, and they're putting their lives on the line for doing so. And it crosses all departments, all aspects of the government.
And you say, your sources say, this isn't a 2019 event. This is soon come.
Yes. In fact, it's here right now. Greg, you can have cancer and not know it.
Yeah. Until it gets so bad that, I'm bleeding, or I can't move my,
It's here right now. All you have to do is recognize the symptoms.
Yeah.
And the deep state's arm, the fake media, their goal is to prevent every American from realizing the symptoms.
Oh, that's great. We'll stop there. Dave Janda, the popular radio show, it's on Sunday from, is it Eastern Time, 2 to 5? Is that right, Eastern Time?
You're absolutely
You can
correct.
live stream it. It's at davejanda.com, Operation Freedom. You've got great guests. There's also a paywall. Somebody asked me, is that worth it? I said, it's really cheap. Yes, it's worth it. He gets people on that I don't get on. You get people, you get tons of people that I don't get on. Good people.
Well, so we have a lot of public information on our site at davejanda.com. I also have a YouTube channel, Operation Freedom. I do like a 6-7 minute video once a week on that. And then we also have the paywall, which is 30 cents a day. You don't have to sign up for a year. People can sign up for a month, $9. If they don't like it, they can get rid of it. But what we do is we deep dive on issues. We have other guests. We discuss information, Greg, that I can't go to on my radio show, because if I went there on my radio show with my guests, the FCC would come in and shut down Wham Talk 1600 in a week.
Wow. I'll put the pay links up. I mean, I don't get anything for it. People know this. I always put links up, folks. They never pay me. I just put it on because that's what Dave does. Dave Janda of davejanda.com. Of course, the radio show Operation Freedom. Put all the links in the after the interview section for you folks on YouTube. It's usawatchdog.com. I always have a back link to it. You can find everything you need to know in the after interview section. Dave, thanks for coming on for a sobering interview and a warning that soon come the financial and economic reset and the rule of law reset soon come this year soon.
Greg, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity, and the one message I want to leave people with is take President Trump's proclamation this September to heart. This is just not another stamped proclamation in September. That whether you look around and if you recognize what's happening all around us, take the necessary steps. Take the necessary steps when it comes to food and water and financial resources and protection. Greg, I know you've done that. I've done that. We're not bunker mentality people, but we are people that recognize the symptoms, and we're